Alright, today we're replacing the AC compressor and the accumulator on this 2003 GMC Yukon. The compressor's gone bad, it's no longer pumping refrigerant, it's making some noise, so it's time for a new one. So we're going to get started and tear into it and get that compressor changed. Alright, first step, we need to be able to access the compressor, which is down below all of this. So we're just going to pull this whole air filter housing and the tubing out of the way. There is a hose clamp, which you just loosen right here, which goes right to the throttle body. Once that's loose, we're going to take it out as one big assembly. So we just want to loosen up the air filter housing screws. Okay, once you have the 4 air filter housing screws out, you got to disconnect the mass airflow sensor. To do that, all you do is pull up on this little plastic tab. It's a locking tab. Then you squeeze the little release inside here and it pulls right up. So now we got the mass airflow disconnected, the air filter housing's loose. We loosen this hose clamp on here, so all we have to do is wiggle this off. Just kind of work it below this coolant hose. And you have this whole assembly out of your way. Just set that aside. Alright, next we're going to remove the fan and the fan shroud in order to gain better access to the compressor. The fan shroud on this is real simple. There's a couple bolts. I already have them loose. Got one bolt here, it's a 10 millimeter. And then down below, you have these little plastic clips. All you do is you get the center of it popped up, and then once you do that, it just pulls right out. So you just pull those 4 clips out in total, and then the 2 10 millimeter bolts. Then you want to carefully just move the hose out of the way. You just pull straight up, and the top half of the fan shroud comes out. Next step is to actually loosen or remove the fan. Now they make specialty tools to loosen the fan, but I have an old trick that works pretty well almost every time. If you have some good adjustable pliers, it'll get a grip on this one large nut behind the fan clutch. Get a grip on it, and then all you do is hit the pliers real lightly with a hammer. And the force of the impact will actually break that nut loose. See, once it's loose, and you can just spin it right off. Okay, well, we went to remove the fan clutch. Turns out, unfortunately, looks like somebody's done the water pump in the past. The fan clutch is actually, I don't know if it's cross-threaded, but it's seized onto the water pump pulley. So rather than replacing the whole water pump, which is what we'd have to do to get that off, what I ended up doing was loosening the fan itself from the clutch, and that gave me just enough room to wiggle the lower fan shroud out of the way. So now, with that loose, you can see we have much better access to the compressor down here. I'm actually touching the front of the compressor here. So we will get started on that and go from there. One important thing that I forgot to mention was that we had a shop suck down all the refrigerant out of the system already. It's very important that you do that. Number one, you can actually get injured by the refrigerant coming out at you. Number two, it's actually illegal to let it vent out into the atmosphere. So make sure you have a shop, recover all the refrigerant that was in there. And once they do that, you're safe to remove the lines on the compressor. So what I'm going to do is start by removing this low side, which is right here. I can actually sneak my wrench up under here, get it on there, break that loose. And then I'm just going to spin that out the rest of the way by hand. Now we have that low side loose. You can actually just pull that low side hose, the whole hose up out of your way. I'm just going to scoot it aside a little bit so that I can access that high pressure hose. Now I've got my ratchet on the high pressure bolt here. I'm going to break that loose, and I'm just going to unspin that. And I'll take it the rest of the way out by hand. And set that bolt aside, and the hose just comes right off. Now I just got to disconnect the electrical connector. It's just right here. It's this little thing. It's got a little tab on either side. You just have to pull back on it, and then it disconnects. Just let that wire hang down out of your way. And our next step is going to be to actually unbolt the compressor itself from the chassis, or I'm sorry, from the engine block. You can see right here, there's one bolt. There's another bolt right here. And there's two on the bottom that are just basically identical to the top two. So all we have to do, I'm actually going to start with the bottom two because they're a little tight, a little harder to get to. This bottom bolt is not the most fun to get out. You're going to have to get underneath the truck, and it comes out with a wrench, a little bit at a time. All right, we got the bolts out of the compressor here. There's one here and one on the back, and the two on the bottom. Now, if we're lucky, it'll just kind of work right out. You might have to wiggle it a little bit. Now you'll see when I get this out, one of these bolts on the bottom we had to leave in because the clearance was so tight. There's the old one. See, this bolt, it'll come fully loose, but it won't actually come out. So you want to keep that in mind, because when you go to put the new compressor in, you want to put that bolt in before you actually set it down in there. So, but that's the old compressor. You can see here it's locked up. Well, it kind of turns, but it's got a really tight spot in there, right there. The compressor's no good on this thing. So, all right. So yeah, we'll get the new one ready and we'll get her put in. All right, we got our old compressor out. We got our brand new compressor here. We got a great deal on this factory Denso AC compressor from Auto Parts Direct to You. There's our brand new compressor. Looks just like the old one. And we also have a new accumulator which we're going to install. Also got that from autopartsdirecttoyou.com. All right, we're ready to install our new compressor. One important thing you want to make sure, depending on the brand of the compressor you get, most of the time they're pre-filled with oil. Like this one, the Denso, it comes pre-filled with the right amount of oil, so we don't have to add any additional. You want to double check on your exact application though. You'll have some paperwork with your new compressor that says, you know, whether or not it's got oil in it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the compressor here. You can see we already got my bolt. Remember, that one's got to stay in, so we'll put that in first, and then all we have to do is get it back in place. I'm going to leave this seal in here until we get it in. You'll see when we pop it off, you don't want this open so that dirt can fall in there when you're putting it in. So we'll leave that in until we absolutely need to take it off. So we'll go ahead and get that in there. Get it all lined up. And next thing is to get a couple bolts started in there. All right, we've got our compressor all bolted in. I still have the lines disconnected from it, and I still have the seal, the little plug on it. So what I want to do next is disconnect the lines coming from the condenser, and while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and take out the whole accumulator assembly, because I'm going to be replacing that anyhow. So all we have to do for that is to break loose these nuts. And we're also going to be replacing the orifice tube on here. Okay, with those off, you can just go ahead and pull all this off of here. Disconnect that switch there. Now this one does have a clamp around the accumulator. Just find the bolt that goes to. If we disconnect that, that should allow the whole assembly to come right off the firewall. All right, let's pull this out, set it aside for now.